Hey, are you a business owner, entrepreneur, or professional? If so, we want you to apply to be a featured guest on our show. My name is Adam Torres, and I host the Mission Matters series of podcasts. I've recorded over 3,000 episodes, and we are just getting started. How do you know if you'd be a good guest to be on the show? Well, only one way to find out, and that's to apply, but I'm going to let you in on a little secret. We want guests that have a story to tell, guests with a brand, a product, or a service that can benefit my audience of listeners. If this sounds like you, go to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. I'd love to talk to you and get to know more about your story. Again, head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, now let's get into the show. Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the Mission Matters Business Podcast, your source for all things business. My name is Adam Torres. You can follow me on Instagram at AskAdamTorres to keep up with my book releases, book tour schedule, signings, all that other good stuff. Always love to connect with you there. And as always, if you'd like to apply to become a co-author of one of my upcoming books, just head on over to the website, missionmatters.com, and click on Become an Author to apply. All right, so today I have Dr. Elia Gourgouris on the line, and he is the founder and president over at the Happiness Center. Elia, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Adam. I appreciate it.
All right, so I'm excited to get into today's topic. So I know you're a happiness expert, #1 best-selling author of 7 Paths to Lasting Happiness. You're an international keynote speaker. I mean, it's pretty obvious what your niche is, and so I love today's topic for you. So 7 keys to navigating any crisis. So it's a great thing to talk about, and I know we're in the midst of this global pandemic right now. So, I mean, how does this relate? Like, how can we successfully navigate this crisis from your experience?
Well, we're not actually facing just a pandemic. The world at large is facing a multitude of global crises, at least 4. Clearly, we have COVID-19. The second major crisis that we have is the mental health crisis, where, according to the United Nations anyway, we have over 1 billion people, that's with a B, that are struggling with depression, anxiety, and stress. I think those numbers, honestly, are underreported because that implies that only 1 out of 7 feel stressed out or depressed or anxious. I think it's probably more like 6 out of 7. If you look at the suicide hotlines, the numbers that are all-time highs, people are suffering from loneliness and are tired and fatigued because this is ongoing. I used to say that life is not a sprint, it's a marathon. Well, guess what? This is an ultra-marathon with no end in sight. And then, of course, the third crisis is the economic and financial crisis with tens of millions of people unemployed here in the United States and hundreds of millions of people unemployed across the globe, and probably 1 or 2 billion people who are basically feeling financially insecure and uncertain. Like, how am I going to provide for my family and my loved ones? And then you throw into that the social, political, and racial strife. So these are 4 global crises. That doesn't include, by the way, natural disasters like floods, hurricanes, earthquakes, and wildfires that are plaguing the land. And it certainly does not include people's personal crises, like perhaps going through a divorce or having relationship issues or having a sick child or having to take care of an elderly parent, or we're not even counting those, right? So as human beings, we're very resilient. We've been through other crises before in our lives, and we survived. Human beings can do 1 or 2 crises at the same time. They really can't do 4 or 5, especially when there's no end in sight. So that's why we're facing these difficulties right now. And in the middle of the pandemic, I had a very, very strong prompting, like as loud as I'm talking to you right now, Adam. Elia, you need to get a book out, because this was back in March, in the middle of March, as things shut down initially. And I called my best friend and partner, Konstantinos Apostolopoulos, and I'm like, brother, I'm going to start writing a book, and we got to get it out in 45 days because people are going to be in great need. I could feel things, My first half of my career, I was a clinical psychologist in private practice. I could feel like there would be mental health issues coming as a result of the shutdown and the isolation and the loneliness. And to put things in perspective, my first book, 7 Paths to Lasting Happiness, Adam, took 3 years to write. And, the one that became a #1 bestseller. So getting a book out in 45 days is insanity. But we did it. We got down and we did nothing else for 45 days. And by May, we got the book out. And initially, we wrote this book for individuals. like how to help as many people as we can and to do our part to help humanity. What we didn't anticipate was this, that by the middle of June, as the economy began to open up again, organizations and businesses started reaching out to us and saying, our employees are scared, they're full of fear, they're depressed, they're anxious, they're traumatized by what has taken place. A lot of them are refusing to come back to work physically. And even the ones that are coming back, we just don't know what to do with them. And so we work a lot with senior HR leaders. And you know what their biggest organizational issue has been this whole year? How to ensure the physical and mental well-being of their employees. That's number one. Adam, that wouldn't even make the top 10 in the past.
Yeah, for sure.
It's the biggest issue right now. The second one, of course, is how to, maintain employee engagement and effectiveness and morale and productivity. Well, guess what? You can't get number two until you fix number one. So that's what we do. And we had, I'll give you two quick examples of, I had personally, Bank of America reached out to me from New York and said, can you help us? And I said, yes. So I did a presentation. Obviously, I couldn't fly to New York. It was online. 1,000 employees, how to navigate the crisis while maintaining employee engagement and happiness levels. And it was good. What I didn't anticipate, what came out of that is it so resonated with the audience that the VP from B of A that asked me to do this presentation said to me and put it down in a video testimonial that this is now going to go out to all 200,000 Bank of America employees throughout the land. So that's the one story. The second story is, at the same time, I had a small nonprofit company here in Colorado who works with developmentally disabled adults, only 350 employees, right? They called me and they wanted exactly the same thing. I did exactly the same presentation. Why do I share that? So you have a big Fortune 100 company, right, and a small nonprofit company, different industries. I mean, you couldn't get as diverse as two companies as you can, right? And the issues were exactly the same. And why is that? Is because in the end, it's all about people, and people are really struggling. They're facing something they've never faced before. And, HR directors and senior leaders, because I primarily work with senior leaders within organizations, need to show up very different. So when I train them, I say, listen, when you train your managers, your supervisors, anybody that has a direct report in essence, and most of your trainings, of course, are not done live. They're done over, a Zoom call. I want you to do this. Train them that when they reach out and connect with their people that are working for them, their employees, don't ask, how are you doing? Close the door and say, look, the door is closed. Lean into the Zoom camera. Get your face in there as close as you can and say, Adam, how are you really doing? How is your family? How are your kids? Is there anything that I can do for you or this company can do for you to make your life better? And then I said, if you want to get some extra credit as a leader, be vulnerable and be real and say, you know what? I'm really struggling too. I have a spouse that gets sick, or I have this. Like, be transparent, be compassionate, be vulnerable. That's the new leadership. The post-pandemic leadership is going to have to look like that. We can't keep going to, business as usual in the past. So, and then my training, of course, is, the 7 keys to how to navigate a crisis.
So tell us a little bit more about maybe the personality types go into navigating a crisis and what that looks like.
Yeah, great question. So in any crisis, there are 4 personality types. The first one is what we like to call the victim. And the victim basically is, why is this happening to me? It's all about me. Never mind that it's happening to 7 billion other people. So that's number 1. Number 2 is the critic. Now, the critic, regardless of what the federal, state, or local government says, or the World Health Organization or the United Nations, they criticize everything. For example, no, it's so. Now, listen, this is, Elia, you should wear a mask when you go outside. Well, that's stupid. Okay, Elia, never wear a mask when you go outside. What are you trying to do, kill me? Like, no matter what. It doesn't matter what, they criticize everything.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, man. They're in the critical mode. Then you have the bystander. That's number 3. And the bystander, it's almost like, imagine the deer with the headlights look. Mind you, a good person, but they're so frightened and so full of fear, they don't know what to do. So they might look to their neighbors, they might look to the left, they might look to the right, but they're paralyzed and immobilized. And what all 3 of these personality types have in common is this. They take no action. They don't move the needle forward. They don't do anything productive. And then, of course, we get to the 4th type, which we like to call the navigator, which was the whole premise of this book and of this program. And the navigator, of course, begins with practicing self-care, like really devotes time, because as the stress levels have increased during these crises, our self-care has to increase. So they take care of themselves physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. You know, they practice flexibility. But I want to make one more point about these 4 personality types before I go into the 7 keys. All 4 of those personality types exist within each human being. And this is an important point to discuss, meaning that all of us have those within ourselves, myself included. When the economy shut down back in March, believe me, all my speaking engagements, I get to speak all over the world about happiness and corporate wellness. You know what happened to all my speaking engagements for 2020? Within a week, they got canceled, all of them. So did I have the bystander initially? Yes, I was frozen. I didn't know what to do. I was blown away that my whole work just disappeared, right? And did I feel like a victim? It's like, yes, why is this happening to me? I was supposed to go and speak in Barcelona in October, which, by the way, I did do that talk, but it was in a Zoom call here from my office. I would much rather have been in Barcelona, to be honest with you. I mean, obviously, right? And then have I been critical from certain things that the government has done? Absolutely I have, and rightly so, I believe. However, and this is important, it's okay to be the victim, the critic, or the bystanders, but to do it for an hour or 2, not for 2 months. It does me no good to criticize for 2 whole months, because that robs me of my own personal happiness and wellness. It does me no good to feel like the victim and the poor me for 2 months, because I'm going to get depressed if I do that, right? So feel it, because those are human emotions and they're normal and natural, but then pivot and navigate. You know what? This book is a result of me becoming a navigator. Even before I even wrote the book, I didn't even know what navigating did for me, but we shifted and became productive and got this book out. And honestly, since it came out in May, there hasn't been one day that I don't do a podcast, a webinar, a radio or television interview, not just in the United States, all over the world, because this message is resonating with people. And now, of course, you know, it's resonating with organizations too. So the one key that I want to talk about, and our time is short, which is the 3rd key to navigating a crisis, is flexibility and adaptability, because I think that's very, very powerful. And I like to use this analogy of the oak tree and the palm tree when it comes to flexibility. The oak tree, as you know, is this massive, huge tree, right? Tall and strong and powerful. It's been around for 100 years. But in a storm, if there's enough rain and saturation and then enough wind, what happens to oak trees? They come crashing down on people, cars, and homes. This is what happens to them. We see that every year. On the flip side, the palm tree was relatively thin. At the peak of the storm, and I want you to think about the storms of life now, at the peak of the hurricane, it bends. Sometimes it bends parallel to the ground, flat. But when the storm passes, the palm tree rises up again and not only survives the storm, but thrives as a result of it, because its roots, it had to dig in deeper, basically, in order to survive the storm. And we need to be palm trees, not oak trees. So people have said, Dr. Elia, what is an oak tree in terms of a human being? I mean, I understand the analogy is beautiful and all that stuff. How does this apply to us as human beings? I said, an oak tree sounds like this. This is the person that says, well, this is the way I've been doing things for 40 years. I'm not going to change now. And they fold their arms. They fold their arms like a little kid. I'm not moving. I'm not going anywhere. You know something? That's a faulty reasoning. If you look at any elite athletes, professionals who get paid millions of dollars to play a game, whether it's football, basketball, baseball, whatever, before the game they play, They're all out in the field for half an hour before the game starts. And what are these elite physical beings at their peak of their performance? What are they doing when they're out there for half an hour before the game starts? They stretch. Why do these athletes stretch? Because if they don't stretch, they might pull a hamstring or have some other injury. They need to be flexible and nimble to be at their peak performance during the game. Now, you and I may not be professional athletes, but we're in the game of life. So if we're not nimble and flexible, we're going to break. This is a completely different beast right now that we're facing, all these different crises. So we must be flexible and adaptable, professionally and personally. And let's get clear about something. There's a big difference between danger versus fear. Danger is real. If somebody comes up to you and I and coughs in our faces, we're in danger. That's not a political statement. That's a factual medical statement. Fear, on the other hand, is not your friend. Fear is paralyzing. Fear is debilitating. Fear is depressing. So you don't want to make a personal decision, a professional decision, or a corporate decision based on fear, because the results are not going to be fine. So let's split those up, because sometimes those two get together. Danger is real. We must respect it, but we don't want to live in fear. We want to live with a positive attitude, because this too shall pass, right? Humanity is down on one knee. We're getting our butts kicked. It's true, but we'll overcome this. And the last key to navigating a crisis is, of course, as a result of all this, go out and help somebody else and be of service and be kind to other people. And Adam, I have got the biggest pushback when I invoke that and I say, go out and help somebody else. People have actually said to me, Dr. Elia, are you crazy? I'm drowning here. I'm depressed. I'm anxious. I'm stressed. I feel financially. Are you asking me to go out and help somebody else while I'm going through all this myself? What am I, my brother's keeper? And I'm like, no, you're not your brother's keeper. You're your sister's keeper and your mother's keeper and your cousins and your friends and your neighbors and the homeless person down the street, or somebody who is 10,000 miles away that lives in India. Because in the end, we're all brothers and sisters. And if you're listening to the sound of my voice, I promise you, you are better off than somebody else. And the quickest way to get out of being depressed is to go out and serve somebody else and help somebody else in need. Because in the end, we're all united and we're all connected. Listen, this is my final statement. I know we're not all in the same boat, but we're all in the same storm. I want you to think about that. Not every situation is exactly the same, but all of us collectively, we're in the same storm. And if this pandemic has taught us anything, it's almost like as some giant hand from the sky came down and pressed the pause button on humanity. It has allowed us to reflect, to ponder what this life is really all about. And this is what it's about. And I'm going to tell you this, do not procrastinate your happiness. Happiness now. Don't wait for when I graduate, when I get the first job, when I get the raise, when the kids leave the home. Do it, and do it now. That it takes work. Of course it takes work. Happiness is the most important thing in life. So practice it and do it now, and navigate successfully and thrive during a crisis, not just survive.
Fantastic. Well, Elia, awesome having you on the show today. So final question, two-part question. Number one, I know that you also have a program out called Self-Care for Healthcare for some of our frontline individuals out there. So I do want you to definitely mention that, because I know some of them are listening to this today, number one. And number two, so what's the best way for them to connect with that program? And number two, what's the best way for people to follow your work overall? So, of course, to grab your book and to learn more about your writing and everything else that you're doing.
Yes, thank you, Adam, and thank you for having me on your show. So both of the books are available on Amazon. Best way to connect with me is through LinkedIn, Elia Gourgouris, Ph.D., the Happiness Doctor. And the Self-Care for Healthcare is something that I'm very passionate about, just because I feel like healthcare providers are putting their very lives on the line and have been for the last 9 to 10 months. They are the true heroes. So I developed a program to help doctors and nurses really practice self-care for themselves, basically how to take care of themselves physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually as they're taking care of all their patients. That's the program. So
perfect,
thank you for having me on the show. And
where do people get that program, just to make sure I have that right? Or do they contact you directly? Yes, is it online? I just want to make sure. Go ahead.
It's not online. They can contact me directly through LinkedIn.
Perfect. Okay, I just want to make sure I was clear.
Yes, dreliagourgouris.com is my website, or thehappinesscenter.com is the corporate site.
Fantastic. Just want to make sure I had that out there. And Elia, thanks again for coming on the show. It's been great having you on, and I know I benefited from your message, and I'm sure a lot of the people listening will also. And to the audience, as always, thank you for tuning in. Hope you had a lot of fun listening to this, and if you're a first-time listener, don't forget, hit that subscribe button. Definitely want you to listen to some upcoming episodes. Have some more great guests coming on for you, and if you're watching this on our YouTube channel, Mission Matters Business, definitely hit the subscribe button there. But, of course, leave us some comments on that video. More importantly, love to keep the conversation going on the YouTube community. And Elia, thanks again for coming on the show. It's been awesome.
Thank you, Adam. I really appreciate it.